GT the Vibe podcast coming at you with another episode. So he talking about um, I love this dude. He's one of my favorite pastors to listen to some of his stuff. But he's talking about being an example, um, and it's crazy because in order for you to be the example in your home and your living, you have to actually be living like Christ. And so people think that if I go to church or if I go to this group, this Bible study, but they don't understand that the people that you impact the most, especially as parents, are kids. Your kids are definitely watching you. So if your kids watch you and see how you interact with your family, with your spouse, with their other siblings, because I mean, most people got multiple kids. I've met very rarely have I met people who only got one kid. So they may see how you interact. You might have four or five kids, and the kids are watching how you interact with all the kids overall, and they're making decisions in their mind on your level of parenting, right? But if you're trying to lead your kids to believe in Jesus, they're also making those decisions too, and they'll make those decisions because one thing that I learned about kids, they're intuitive. Like we be thinking they don't be knowing, but best believe the kiddos definitely be knowing. And so you have to be careful. You have to pay attention to how you interact because they're watching. But you're the example, essentially. You're their main example of what it means to be Christ-like. And so I'm gonna let him speak, and then we're gonna talk. We're gonna break down what he's saying. But man, he gets hyped up, so I love it.
I'm telling you why so many young people in our Bible believing Baptist churches turn 18 years old and they leave and they don't come back. It's because they see so much stinking hypocrites in the pew and go home and live a different way at the house. I'm telling you, that world ain't just examining you. Your children are examining you, mom and daddy. They're watching you. They see you saying amen to the preaching and then go home and scream bloody murder at your husband and scream and holler at your wife and flip chairs over and holler and scream and flip out and throw pots and pans and act like a wild banshee and then walk into church and, oh, how I love Jesus. I'm telling you, our children are examining us too.
Just that short little 40-second clip was huge. Your children are examining you too. Not only is the world looking at you, but your children are looking at you, screaming all that stuff. Yeah, I get that. So one thing you got to be careful and one thing you got to be mindful of when it comes to being the example is that you have to be consistent. Like you can't fluctuate a lot. You have to be consistent. And so I think that what happens is, and especially if you're like in your home has to be united, number one. If your home ain't united, you can't really teach your kids anything because you got to understand that if you're not united, your kids are going to get a coin essentially. They're going to get a quarter, heads or tails, and so it's a guess every single time they flip it. And if there's a guess every single time they flip it, that doesn't build consistency. And kids need consistency to learn. They learn through consistency. And so if you can't give them that, right? If you can't give them that consistency, then it's kind of hard for them to be able to learn what it means to be Christ-like. And so, number one, in order for you to be able to show your kids what it means to be Christ-like at home, is you need to have some consistency. So, the message has to be consistent all the time, and then you have to also walk the same all the time. So, if you go to church on Sunday and you love the Lord Jesus on Sundays, you gotta walk and you gotta talk it, and you gotta do that every single day of the week. And because your kids are watching, they're examining. And like I said, it has to be unity. If there's no unity, then you can't really teach them anything because Jesus is unity. So if you have a divided home, you can't really teach your kids anything about Jesus inside a divided home, right? You created an atmosphere where it is hard for them to see consistent unity from the parents. That's number one. The message has to be consistent too. Because when I think about kids, everything that kids go through, everything that they do is all about consistency. Like you have to have consistent boundaries for kids. Your discipline has to be consistent because you're building habits essentially. And we have to understand is that young kids' brains is like the small things matter a lot. Like people, like parents will hit the big things. I know I do. I'll try to hit the big things all the time, but the small things matter a lot. Like if you let the small things go to the cracks, they become a big thing. because like kids are intuitive. Like I got an 11-year-old son, he's very intuitive. Like he be knowing more than what he probably should be knowing, but he be knowing because he pays attention, right? Kids are paying attention because they want to know, and so you have to have unity, you have to have consistency inside the household in order for your kids to be able to thrive in the life that Jesus has put forth to them. Number three, the third thing you got to do. So not only do you have to walk it, you have to talk it, but you also have to teach it. And so you got to teach your kids. And it may not be that some people think that if you just bring the Bible out and read it every day, or if you just watch a show or something like that, like they think that that's going to get through the message. But I don't think that gets through the message. I think that you teach them the fundamentals. If you teach them the fundamentals, which you don't even have to bring a Bible out to teach the fundamentals. These are consistent fundamentals, like be loving, be caring, be nurturing, tell the truth, be honest, right? Those are fundamental things that we know as adults. We know you're supposed to do that, but as kids, they don't know. And so when you're teaching them those things, the fundamentals, you don't have to break out a Bible every day to teach them the fundamentals. Like those are things that are easy to teach over time, but you have to be consistent in your teaching, right? You have to always teach the same thing consistently, because the moment that you change, you set a new standard. And that's the problem that happens in a lot of households is say you got husband and wife, right? Inside a household. And this is going to be a dysfunctional Christian household. You got husband and wife inside a household, right? They're not in their own roles. So if a husband and wife aren't in their roles, that God calls. So for number one, I call it the triangle. I'm gonna write it down. I'm gonna show it to the camera. So since you got God at the top of the triangle, right? As you kind of make your way down, and then I kind of do like a middle, and then I do outsiders. So I don't even think you see it. So essentially at the top you got God, husband and wife as you start to come down. Bottom, so you got a bottom middle pendulum is what I call it, kids, and then all the way down at the bottom of the triangle is outsiders, anybody that's outside. And so if you're not in order from top to bottom of what God wanted you to be, you can't technically teach your kids or show them what it means to be a Christian. Like you can't teach them that, because if you're not in order, you can't put your kids in order. So I think it starts at the top and then it just works its way down as you go down the list, as you go down to the bottom. So if you're not constructed and you're not in place at the top, you can't really, and that's where most of the division comes from. It comes from the top. It don't come to kids. The kids aren't going to be divided. The kids are going to do whatever the parents ask them to do. Now, if the parents are divided, that causes division amongst the kids. And so even in just this parenting, your daily parenting life, when you're parenting your kids, consistency has to be there too. You have to be united there, because if you have two separate parenting messages going out to all your kids, it may resonate with some, it may not resonate with others, right? Or this parent's way that they do it may resonate a little bit more than this parent. So this parent's struggling because they're not like this parent, but then this parent may struggle in this area because they may not be as nurturing, they may not be as loving. So they may not have like the best like loving relationship with the kids, but so you kind of got a back and forth where there's no consistency. And so that's where having unity helps, because technically when it comes to parenting, you gotta have a united front, because when they always said you get one or two, you get two kids. Once you get past two kids, and you're like just herding them, just you put your arms out trying to herd them like sheep essentially. And so part of the problem is that when you get past that lucky number, now you have to have a consistent message for 4, 5, 6, 7 kids. Johnny K plus 8, they had 8 kids. So they gotta have a consistent message for 8 kids. So your message has to be consistent, and it has to be consistent per kid, right? You can't treat one kid different than the other. You gotta be careful. You can't have favoritism on one kid more than the other. You gotta be careful, because Jesus doesn't have favoritism on anybody. And so if we're going to teach our kids how to be Christ-like, we got to teach them that the favoritism is not a thing. And so if you have favoritism upon one kid more than the other, or you're nicer to this kid, you're harder on this kid, like even as dads, it's hard for us as dads, because when you got sons, you just got to be, you just know you got to be hard, because you know what it's like for men. Like you understand what it's like for men. So when you have daughters, a little bit more softer and all that stuff, but you have to be careful. Like you got to be careful as a man, because your sons see that too. You got multiple sons, you got multiple daughters, like they're watching. And so you have to be careful. So you have to show some consistency. So you gonna have to be hard on your daughter too, man. You got to be hard on your daughter. If you're gonna be hard on your son, you gotta be hard on your daughter too. If you're gonna expect your son to listen, obey, and be respectful, then you have to have the same expectation for your daughter as well. You can't have separate expectations. You can't change up expectations. It's the same for all the kids. It's gender neutral. And so that's how you get to a place where your kids understand what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be Christ-like, and what it means to follow Jesus. And then when they leave the house, because you've instilled the values, the core values that I told you guys, those 5 things, you don't even have to bring the Bible out to talk about them 5 things. Like that's just everyday things that you have conversations about. You correct them when they're wrong on these things. Like that's what you do. And so if you can get those 5 core things in there, and then you bring the Bible in, bring some teaching from the Word in, then it's hard for them to stray away when they turn 18 and leave the house because you set a good enough foundation. Now, if you didn't set a good enough foundation, it's kind of hard for them to stick around. And I think that's the problem is that a lot of times we don't set a good enough foundation for them. We think we did, but in actuality, when we look back at it, we didn't really set a good enough foundation for them. So, but I think that's the key. I think you got to be united. You got to be consistent. You got to set the foundation. You got to set those 5 pillars. And if you do those things, I think that you will. Those things will breed consistency, but I also think that they will give them a message, right? You'll instill something in them that they can take for a lifetime. And so, but that's kind of my take, man. I appreciate what this guy said. He's huge on parenting. He talks a lot about parenting. I've seen a couple of his sermons on parenting. He's very old school, so the new school parents probably wouldn't like it. Um, but my thing on parenting, and this is just kind of just like a fact I'll throw in. I look at results, not emotions. Like I look at results like, are you getting the results that you want? Because if you're not getting the results that you want, then you probably need to try something different. Because people will get stuck and just think that their way is the only way, so they won't get positive results. Like you got to see positive results, and it can be positive results is like your kids talk to you more, they give you more information. It can be positive results where if you got kids that don't talk to people in public, where you've like pushed them and pushed them and pushed them. Hey, you need to say hi. You need to be polite in public. You push that, and so that you see they're starting to talk to people in public. They don't have to be full conversation, but you're teaching them how to be respectable young human beings in public. And so that comes from teaching. That comes from home, right? And so that's where it starts. And I think everything starts off in the home, and then whatever they do outside the home is based on what is done or what is taught inside the home. So um, discipline's one of the huge ones. Discipline's one of the huge one that causes divisions in relationships because everybody has a different way. I think I need discipline like this, but one thing I will tell you on discipline is this: you have to be consistent, you have to be concise, but you still have to be loving at the same time, right? You still got to be loving because you don't do it out of anger. You do it out of love. You do it because I love you. You teach them how to be respectable, disciplined young individuals because you know that that's the path to success in life, right? It's not, oh, I just want you to listen to me. It's I want you to learn how to be respectful. So that way, when you go out into the real world, right? When you get older, you got a boss. You'll be respectful to your boss. When you go out into the real world, you get a spouse. You will be respectful to your spouse. When you go out in the real world, and then you become the boss, you'll still be respectful to those that are subordinates to you, right? You'll still be respectful because the foundation was laid. A lot of times, what happens is they don't get the foundation: respect, love, care, compassion. They don't get these things, and so you end up with somebody who doesn't understand how to respect an individual, or you end up with somebody who doesn't know how to properly love an individual. And so you'll see that in their adult relationships. So however you teach them to be in relationships as a young kid is how they will be as adults. And so if you teach them that they can never be told no, then as they get older, they're going to think that everything is theirs and they can never be told no. If you don't teach them to share, right, how to share, how to be generous, then when they get older, then you're not going to have a generous kid. You're going to have a kid that wants to take everything from everybody and everything is theirs. Like you're going to have a kid but you're developing a kid. And you have to understand that you want to develop a kid that people want to be around, right? And that takes work. That takes effort. Man, you're going to get mad at yourself. Many times I've been mad at myself, asking myself, what the heck am I doing wrong? So I'll try some new stuff. I'll try something different. Um, but I'm big on trying something different. Like if it don't work, don't keep trying the same thing over and over again. right? That's the definition of insanity. He's doing the same thing over and over again, but then thinking that out of nowhere you're going to get a different result. You're going to get the same result, and then get rid of the mindset that kids just grow out of everything because they don't. Um, Small problems with small kids become big problems with big kids. And you'll see that. I've seen that in teens. I mean, I talk to moms out here in the streets, and they'll tell me what their kids were like when they were younger, screaming, yelling, bullying, and they're still doing it. They're committing crimes at 16, 17 years old because parents didn't set that foundation of what it means to be a respectable, loving young human. I mean, and that's just basics. That's literally just the basics. If you set that foundation, that will take them through life. Like they can take those, if you give them two things, respect and be loving. And I will add generosity in there, but I think generosity goes into the loving category. But if you add those three things in there, you made a pretty good, I'll say Kool-Aid because I've been craving Kool-Aid. You made a pretty good batch of Kool-Aid. You put just enough sugar in there. You put the whole bag in there. That was enough. You stirred it with your arm. But you made those three things can literally take your kids through life if you give them to them. But you have to give them to them. That's the problem. Most parents, they just kind of sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Don't do that. Don't be a sit back and relax and enjoy the show parent. Like intervene when you need to intervene. Let go when you need to let go. Because sometimes they got to regulate themselves. So as they get older, you got to let them handle their business on their own. You don't always want to interject. You want them to be able to work things out. Like if they're fighting over a toy, they're 10, 11, 12 years old, and you got two of them. Now there's a time to interject, but there's a time when you just kind of lay back and just let them do the thing. You guys will figure it out. You guys are old enough to figure it out now, so y'all figure it out. And then they will figure it out. They will come to a conclusion themselves, and they will feel good about it because they did it. Mommy and daddy didn't have to come over here and regulate for me. I was able to do this myself. Makes you feel good about it. So that's how you build confidence too. So let them do their thing. I mean, when you get the 2-year-old that wants to do everything, thinks they can do everything under the sun now. They're just grown. The 2-year-olds be thinking they're 20. It's crazy. But you gotta let them do it. Sometimes you gotta let them do their thing. You gotta have patience. That's my biggest thing. I don't have no patience. I've had to work on patience. You gotta be patient. You gotta let them do their thing. And so that's all I got. I appreciate you guys rocking with us, man. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share. Keep it pushing. That's what we do here at the Bible Podcast. And we're gonna roll. I'll see you guys on the next one.